How are we doing, everyone? Welcome back into the SFS channel. In this episode, we're going to be continuing our conversation for 2022 Dynasty Fantasy Football by talking through 5 players that I like as trade targets. This video is going to be the first installment of a series of episodes throughout this offseason that I'll be continually adding upon and editing as we get new information as we progress towards the NFL draft, free agency, and all that good stuff. But now that we're starting to wind down in the postseason, just the conference championship weekend and the Super Bowl left to be played here, we're taking a look at some names that I think have some great long-term value for our rosters here in today's episode. As we get into our first player here, make sure you've dropped down and clicked that subscribe button. If you're new around here to the channel, we'll be making Dynasty content all off season long. And if you want to get in contact with me and have me help you build your teams, check out the SFS community Discord server. The invite link to that is in the description of today's episode. And you can get on in there, have a conversation with the community members we already have joined, and interact and engage with myself. If you become an SFS Gold member on my website, sizzlefantasy.com, you can also get access to me helping you actually build that team and giving you in-depth personal advice to build those rosters going forward. So the first player I want to talk about today is Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh Jacobs has been someone who in the past I have not been easily excited about, but I actually saw some really positive signs towards the end of this season that going forward make me feel more comfortable and make me feel more bullish on how I consider him in the fantasy trade market here. He's still a relatively young player entering in the NFL through the 2019 draft class, being a first-round draft choice for the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that it's fair to say that to this point in his NFL career, he hasn't been a dominant player. Maybe he hasn't lived up to the absolute ceiling that he has the potential to have done so far in his career. But again, this season in particular, down the stretch of the year, we saw some really great things, especially in those final 2 games against the Chargers and the Cincinnati Bengals. The reason I have Josh Jacobs as a trade target as we head into this offseason is that I feel very comfortable with the situation that he's in with the Las Vegas Raiders going forward, and I think that there are some things that could potentially boost and improve this situation as we head into next season. The first, of course, is finding the next head coach of this football team. The Raiders obviously went through all that drama with John Gruden. They had Rich Bisaccia as their interim head coach, and they actually made the playoffs, went to the wild card round, lost a close one. They were almost able to score that touchdown and extend that game into potential overtime. And who knows what would have happened there, but they fell short. The Raiders were eliminated from the playoffs, and now here we stand. This team is looking to regroup, reload, and head into 2022 strong. So we currently, at the time of recording this video, I'm going to post this relatively quickly after I'm finished filming this episode, but they are still in the search for their next head coach of this team. They've actually interviewed some members of the New England Patriots staff. Josh McDaniels, in particular, is one of the specific names they've looked at there. I believe they've also interviewed Byron Leftwich of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well, which is a name that would intrigue me. Nevertheless, what I'm mainly looking for is for the Raiders, which obviously being a fantasy football analyst here, we always look for those offensive head coaches. It's not the end-all be-all. You don't have to have an offensive head coach to be a productive offense or to have a successful fantasy producing offense, but obviously it helps when you have the center and the core of your schematic game plan being from an offensive-minded individual at the top of that coaching staff. That is obviously something that we generally consider to be an asset unless your name is Urban Meyer for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Josh Jacobs here entering into next season, again, is still a player on his rookie contract, someone that has some shelf life left in him that can definitely be used as a multi-year starter, and someone I don't see having his job be in jeopardy this offseason. Kenyon Drake, I believe, is still under contract for the Raiders. I'll have to check into that situation in just a little bit here, but he's not someone that overly threatens me here. Josh Jacobs did see an increase in his passing production this season, albeit minuscule. It was still a step in the right direction. But what Josh Jacobs really is here is he's a reliable and stable RB2 that can present a presence in your lineup that is dependable week in and week out. Josh Jacobs is not someone that should be your fantasy running back 1 on your dynasty roster, but he is certainly someone that can add and be a foundational piece to a really strong core and stable of running backs that you have at your disposal. Again, you're looking for someone to be your your number one running back who is a top 12 producer who has elite upside. And Josh Jacobs is not that. That's not what I'm saying he is here. But he's someone who can be an uber dependable force. And if you're looking to him as your RB2 or even your RB3 on your roster, if you already have a strong core, this can be a really nice asset to continue to build those championship pieces around the centerpieces of your dynasty team. So Josh Jacobs, I think, is someone who is also affordable at this point because he isn't someone who has really cracked into the elite upper echelon tier of fantasy running backs. This isn't someone who's finished with a top 5 season yet in his career. And a large part of that was because of his lack of explosiveness, his lack of pass catching production, not even his pass catching ability per se, but just his usage in this Raiders offense has not been to a level where he's had enough volume in that phase of the game to be a dominant PPR force. And the other thing I like here is the fact that the Raiders have the opportunity to continue adding and building to the offensive line pieces they have. This season in 2021, heading into the year, was considered to be a down year in terms of the personnel that the Raiders had at the offensive line group. And now moving into 2022, they'll return some of those younger names. And Alex Leatherwood, for example, their first-round pick back in 2021, who was kind of a whiff. I don't want to say a whiff because he's only been a rookie here and it's his first year in the league. But he was drafted to play offensive tackle and he's been kicked inside to guard because of his struggles in the pass protection game. But nevertheless, you still got an opportunity here for the Raiders to improve that offensive line, bring in a more stable organization and regime with that new head coach. And then you've got the final 2 games for Josh Jacobs here. One against the Los Angeles Chargers, a make it or break it. You win, you're in scenario for this Raiders football team. Back in Week 18, and another matchup with the Cincinnati Bengals in that before mentioned Cincinnati Bengals wild card playoff round. In those 2 games, Josh Jacobs had 2 of his most efficient rushing outings of the season. Against the Chargers in Week 18, he had 26 rushes for $132. That's good for 5.1 yards per carry. That is a very good marker for any running back to be at, and significantly higher than Josh Jacobs' career average, right around 4 yards per carry. And then you go on to the next week into the playoffs against the 5th-ranked Cincinnati Bengals rushing defense during the regular season. Jacobs put up just 13 rushing attempts, but 83 yards and 6.4 yards per carry. In particular, he had 1 big rush off the right side of the offensive line. They kind of kept that Raiders team in it. They were desperate for points. They needed production very badly, and Jacobs' rushing ability was able to open that thing up and get them where they needed to be in that game. So Josh Jacobs, again, he's affordable. He's a dependable RB2, I think. And if you're looking to use him as an RB2 or even an RB3 on your roster, I think it's a great asset to go out and acquire for that position because of how important having running back depth is to building a championship roster in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Cam Akers is my next name up on the list here now. Cam Akers is someone we anticipated being a top 12 RB1 with a massive ceiling heading into this past 2021 season. However, obviously the torn Achilles injury that he suffered midway through the summer and caused him to miss almost the entirety of the regular season played a big role in that. We didn't really see him. We didn't get any utility out of him in terms of fantasy production all season long, but moving forward, now that his value has taken a ding, and especially since we probably saw the worst football Cam Akers has ever played back in the divisional round against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think his stock might be taking a slight enough hit to cause panic to incite with some fantasy managers to the point where they might be willing to move off of Cam Akers. Now, for some, if your league mate that owns Cam Akers is very or rather not very trigger happy, but someone who is very calm, collected, and they are a solid thought processor and isn't going to panic about this might not be a situation where you're able to get that discounted trade price. But if this is a situation where you can find someone who is a little bit quicker to panic when things turn south, they look to make the move account too early rather than waiting till it was too late, Cam Akers is a situation where I think you could go out and find a productive running back with a massive ceiling heading into next year. Obviously, if you didn't pick up on what I was talking about with Cam Akers playing his worst football just a week ago against the Buccaneers, he averaged just 2 yards per carry on 24 rushing attempts against the Bucs, and he lost 2 crucial fumbles to the Tampa Bay defense in critical spots of that game that could have put the Buccaneers away multiple times. One was actually in the red zone inside the 10-yard line right before the half. The Rams are about to punch it in again, go up and extend their margin even further, their lead that is. And then the second time around was the Bucs needed to stop. They went all out to get the football back one last time for Tom Brady to try and tie up that football game. And Cam Akers actually fumbles after picking up the first down or after gaining, the line to gain. And the Bucs get the football back, tie things up, and then Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp have to do their thing. So the intrigue for me is a belief in the player, of the belief in Cam Akers, the talent, the belief in the offensive situation here with Matt Stafford under center, and especially a belief in the head coach and Sean McVay to keep this offense trending in the right direction and operating at the highest level it possibly can. Akers is still heading into just year 3. He's got a lot of football left to be played. He's basically entering right into prime territory for an NFL running back shelf life. And although that Achilles injury is something that's usually thought to be devastating, one of the worst injuries in sports in terms of the impact it has on a player's explosiveness and their level and ability to perform at an explosive level, Akers was still able to return. He has looked a little bit rusty. His average has been very underwhelming, just over 2.5 yards per carry during the NFL postseason, which he's totaled 41 total carries. In the first game back against the Arizona Cardinals, he averaged just 3.2 yards per carry. So you're seeing very modest, very average numbers for a player of Cam Akers' talent level. It's, again, probably going to come down to getting him a full offseason of rest here. I expect to still see a heavy dosage of him in the NFC Championship game here this week against the 49ers, although I would not be shocked to see him have another modest performance because they're a very physical football team, whereas the Rams tend to play a little bit more of a finesse style of offense. So I would expect Cam Akers, his struggles overall to continue here throughout the postseason. Maybe we see his touches pulled back a little bit, and that will continue to further the panic that we see with those other members and owners of him in our Dynasty leagues. I would just go toss an offer out there, see what's the worst thing that can happen. I might even be willing, because of the situation, the offense he's in, to toss over a first-round pick for the 2023 season or package up an assortment of players depending on which situation you're in. To be honest, I don't know if it's worth my time to make a trade scenario for you. If you are looking to make an offer for Cam Akers, feel free to drop your assets for your roster down in the comment section below, and we can go from there and try and formulate a package for you to go about executing that deal. But moving into our next player here, Gabriel Davis is someone at the wide receiver position that I am becoming very interested in terms of having him for a long-term position on a fantasy roster. This is a guy who, again, reaps the reward of the situation he's placed in. Having Josh Allen as your long-term quarterback for the Buffalo Bills is a great situation to be in. He is one of the most enabling players at the quarterback position to produce fantasy production. And when you look at the Buffalo Bills situation, there's kind of a 4-man wide receiver core dynamic going on right now. And Gabe Davis, for the majority of this season, has been etched into that number 4 spot. But since the postseason and since he's been making plays and flashing potential all season long, his snap count percentage is increasing. The amount of opportunities he's having to make plays is going up as well. And we saw him take full advantage of that this past weekend against the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's, I'll touch on it right now. The main reason you might not be able to get this deal done for a reasonable price, because there is that inflated hype around Gabriel Davis right now, because a fantasy manager who owns Gabriel Davis at this current point in time is probably thinking especially extra high about him. That might cause some difficulty to pull this trade off. But if you can acquire a player in a situation where Emmanuel Sanders is a free agent, I don't expect the Bills to bring him back. He's still a very savvy veteran and a nice presence to have in the locker room. But when you've got a player like a Gabe Davis entering just into year 3 of the NFL with the talent he has, the flashes he's been making dating back to his rookie season, the 200-plus yards he had and 4 touchdowns against the Kansas City Chiefs in the biggest, the clutchest of moments in that game. He scored multiple times in crunch time for that football team. This guy brings a lot to the table. Again, the situation is fantastic. You've already got Stephon Diggs there, who's going to be drawing the toughest cornerback assignment in situations where the opposing defensive coordinator decides to travel his top cornerback. That's going to leave Gabriel Davis with an elite quarterback throwing him the football in lighter coverage than maybe he warrants. So I think, again, the situation here is what makes this such an opportune investment of your draft capital or other assets on your roster to go out and acquire a Gabe Davis. Again, please, if you have questions about, making a trade with the Dynasty assets you have, drop your specific situation down in the comment section below or join the SFS community Discord server and talk with me in there. But Gabriel Davis is someone I would absolutely be looking to get on my roster and hold him because he's such a young receiver. He can still improve quite a bit. And the flashes he's already shown us in this situation, I think, can only continue to get better as his playing time increases and as the opportunities and the amount of footballs Josh Allen throws his way goes up here over the course of his career. Travis Etienne, going back to the running back position, 3 running backs on the board today. This is a guy who hasn't actually played in a single NFL contest yet to this point in his career due to that Liz Frank injury he suffered in the preseason during training camp this year. And that was really unfortunate. I'm not so sure the things we were going to see from Travis Etienne were going to be all that positive nonetheless due to Urban Meyer's kind of odd receiver hybrid gadget role that he was integrating him into for this offense in year one. So I don't know. Chalk it up to what you will, but I feel much more comfortable with a hopefully Byron Leftwich. The Jags are another team that have not named their head coach here for the 2022 season and beyond. I think Byron Leftwich or any offensive-minded coach would be a fantastic fit here. Obviously, for my fantasy biases and wanting these players to play out in the right direction in terms of just the production they're able to create, but also I think for the development with a young quarterback like a Trevor Lawrence, I think it's a very important thing that you go out there and get an ecosystem of coaches surrounding your young QB that can set him up for success. That's one of my worries now with Justin Fields, the fact that they went out and signed a defensive head coach from the Indianapolis Colts to be their next head coach, Matt Eberflus. I don't know if that's the most advantageous thing for the development of your quarterback. So we're getting a little bit off topic here, but Travis Etienne is someone who I think the next head coach will come in and have the potential or at least the opportunity placed in front of them to use Travis Etienne in a similar, not necessarily the same, but a similar fashion to how we saw Alvin Kamara be used early on in his career and then progressively the ways he's been used since. In his first season as a rookie, Alvin Kamara was basically splitting the backfield with Mark Ingram. They were both able to thrive. They were both able to be incredibly productive in the fantasy space and give us production on a weekly basis that you could depend on. And their ceilings were fantastic because they had the quarterback in Drew Brees to continuously move the sticks, move the football down the field, and be a very productive offense. I'm not quite sure, and actually I'm going to just say they are nowhere close to the level that Saints offense was functioning at this moment in time. You do have a very good quarterback, though. You do have Travis Etienne, the guy who I'll comp to that Alvin Kamara skill set, and you do have James Robinson, another talented running back. I don't quite think him and Mark Ingram are good comps necessarily in terms of just who they are as players, but for the sake of this example and for this situation, James Robinson is more of the traditional running back, which in that Saints situation was what Mark Ingram was to his team. So I think there's an opportunity here where Travis Etienne can be a very efficient pass-catching running back who's able to keep himself very clean and healthy, because when you're catching the football out in space and not getting hit and running in the trenches every play, you've got a chance to maintain higher levels of health and remain fresher as the season wears on. So I think that there's an increased opportunity here in year 2 with Travis Etienne making his NFL debut to be put in situations to have great fantasy success. This is an offense that probably needs another season, another draft, maybe even 2, to take significant steps forward in the right direction. Now, they did lose some talent at the wide receiver position, that being DJ Chark to injury last year, which probably was not a help for Trevor Lawrence as a rookie trying to sift through the mess of Urban Meyer and that coaching staff on top of just playing against NFL defenders. So hopefully Travis Etienne can add to the supporting cast and help that Lawrence has in that Jags offense. Hopefully they can help elevate each other. Obviously, teammates back at Clemson won national championships together. So Etienne, someone I would also go look and make a move for. I think that his value in terms of what it is now versus what it was at draft season when he was in the rookie class of 2021 has taken a hit because of that Jag situation, the mess, James Robinson's involvement with the team, or presence on that roster. So I would go take a flyer on Travis Etienne. I think the ceiling is very, very high, and there's a lot of opportunity to be had in this situation. And then the last player I'll talk about in this trade episode, remember, we'll be posting these throughout the offseason. I will for sure be updating this after NFL free agency. I will for sure be updating this after the NFL draft and probably many more times in between because I love talking trade content and just talking through players that I'm either looking to buy or looking to sell. That's really been the message of today's episode, is that these aren't necessarily buy low players, but these are players I am looking to buy if you can find a situation to get yourself in the position to get these players on your roster and acquire their services for your dynasty team. So Rashod Bateman's the last guy I want to talk about today. Bateman is someone who just has the skills and the tool set that I look for in a number one wide receiver in the National Football League. Now, there might be a little bit of panic surrounding Rashod Bateman and Hollywood Brown owners around Antonio Brown's incited publicity that he would like to be a Baltimore Raven next year and play for his cousin Hollywood Brown's quarterback Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. So for those who are scared, worried about that situation, if AB were to step into the Ravens offense, what would that look like for Rashod Bateman? I hate to say this. It sounds like I'm being kind of snarky here, but what's the worst thing that can happen? I mean, is AB going to play 4, 5, 6 games for that Ravens teams and take away a chunk of seasons worth of production? I mean, there are just so many things that can go wrong in terms of having Antonio Brown on a roster, and just because he's interested in joining the Ravens does not in any case or any world mean that that's going to be what's going to happen here. I don't envision John Harbaugh being the type of coach that would bring in AB with open arms after the antics he pulled off this season with the Buccaneers. So I think that to be scared off of Rashod Bateman or have your valuation of him drop for someone like Antonio Brown and his potential role and presence on this team is completely silly, because Rashod Bateman's got age on his side, much more so, and Hollywood Brown for that matter as well, much more so than Antonio Brown does. Brown is now pushing into his mid-30s while these players are still in their mid and early 20s. And Rashod Bateman's skill set is just so fantastic. It's something that can absolutely be built upon here throughout the remaining years of his NFL career. He's got route running. He's got all the attention to detail. He's a super, super refined player for this stage in his career. He just hasn't gotten the volume that you need to produce elite fantasy numbers. He made some really impressive, flashy plays last year. But again, with the Ravens' nature of being one they are able to, a run-first football team. Now, that wasn't always able to be the situation with Lamar Jackson out there falling behind with Tyler Huntley. He was keeping them in games, and actually some of Bateman's best plays came with Huntley under center. However, again, this just wasn't set up to be the most successful rookie season, and we knew that coming into year one. The Ravens weren't going to be a team that was going to be airing the football out as much as other teams, so that was someone that we looked to as having more long-term potential and less short-term potential in terms of their immediate impact in fantasy lineups post being drafted in a rookie draft. So Rashod Bateman's someone, if you're able to stash a receiver, and it's not necessarily so much that I think that he's going to boom this season. I think that there's always a chance because the talent, again, is there, but the opportunity needs to be there as well. As this situation continues to evolve and develop here over the course of time, I think Bateman's a player who I would absolutely love to have on my roster. Again, that upside is so fantastic. The floor is not something that we're really talking about or even worrying about at this point in time. But with so much opportunity in front of him long term, I think Bateman is an excellent play to add to deeper wide receiver cores. Alrighty, one more time. Those were 5 dynasty trade targets at this point in time here as we're winding down the NFL postseason. Remember to click that subscribe button if you're new around here. Drop a like on today's episode. And please leave any questions you have for me about your teams down in the comment section below. Or again, you can join the community Discord server through the invite link in the description of today's episode. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace out.